Welcome back from lunch, everyone. I trust that you had a good lunch. I hope that all of you had the macarons. Although I had 3 of them, so there might not be enough to go around. Okay, so next up we have Ayata to present on Ayata, who's presenting on behalf of Air Services Australia on scenario 4.2, the first of our long-range scenarios. It will show how swim can help mitigate the damage during significant weather events. We have the privilege of Mr. John Moore, who's the Assistant Director, Safety and Flight Operations, Asia Pacific in IATA. Mr. Moore, please.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to the Singapore leg of the demo. Unfortunately, for those of you who were in Bangkok, you'll have to listen to all my poor jokes again and then bear with me through half an hour of technical ATC and ATFM information. We almost didn't make it here just then because we had a bit of a last-minute comms glitch. As Elizabeth pointed out, I'm doing this on behalf of a collaboration of Australian agencies, including Air Services Australia, Qantas Airways, Virgin Australia and the Australian Bureau of Meteorology. Unfortunately, none could be present, so they asked for the loudest Australian north of the border, and they found me, so that's why I'm here to deliver. What I'd like to do, what I did last week, is if everyone can just turn around and look into the camera, into our live YouTube feed, and give a wave, please, because the only person besides working as hard as our technical people in the back of the room is Ibrahim back in Canberra at 5:30 on a Friday afternoon, wishing I'd hurry up so he could go and have a beer, but we nearly didn't have him connected about 2 minutes ago, so we're glad to be here. Now, we're going to talk about volcanic ash, weather diversions, and how we can manage them with SWIM and long-range ATFM. We're going to look at 2 flights from Bangkok to Sydney, and we can look at SWIM in a way of gate-to-gate operations where a flight that incurs no issues or problems, and how we use that information to better calculate our arrivals management, our demand capacity balancing, how we can take away a lot of the error margin and add confidence to long-range calculations so that the interruptions are less of an effect, and that the airlines in particular and the ATC and other agencies can manage those in a much more informed, earlier way. Now, when we talk about SWIM, I know there are people in here that still are early in the concept, so if you have this near you or in your little bag that you were given on the way in, you can see the diagram that David was talking about this morning about the architecture, which is the enterprise messaging systems for each of the participants, and the one that joins in those that haven't got an enterprise messaging system, the SkyFusion system that joins us all in. Now, the concept of SWIM is moving away from point-to-point connections and individual interfaces and all the costly, time-consuming things that go with that, and getting into a better way to share information in our ATM world. So the analogy I used in Bangkok, which I'll use again, but now with the actual picture, is imagine that's all sitting in a pond. And each of those EMS, anytime they produce a piece of information, someone there is dropping a pebble in that pond, and that ripple is moving out at great speed. Now, if you're not interested in that information, that ripple passes you by. But if you're engaged in a SWIM arrangement or a SWIM agreement where you need that information to ingest into your systems, then you automatically do that. So every time someone drops a pebble in that pond, the ripple flows out, and if it affects you, you get that automated update for all your systems. So that's a simplified way to think about the concept of SWIM, as opposed to the point-to-point. So we're going to walk through these flights from Bangkok to Sydney and look at all the small ways that the information sharing can slightly differ from today, and how it can actually improve how we do things, and some of the benefits that we're looking for to get out of these exercises. So let's begin our journey. Qantas 24 and Virgin 32 are both A330s. They filed their flight plans. from Bangkok to Sydney, and they're departing in the evening. You'll see that they file them from the Australian bases at the airline ops centres. They're filed in the SWIM FIXM format, and they appear. Here they are appearing in the Thailand system. The beauty of moving from ATS templated flight plans is that we get a lot more scope of information we can put into an XML plan and be able to share it a lot easier as well over the internet-like comms that we'll use. So the flights are planned, they're in the systems. You'll see then the actual trajectories are able to be viewed. They're pretty much the same. There's some slight differences at the end as their own individual systems look at better wind variations and how they might do it. So the information's there and ready to go. Everyone in that trajectory, the city pair, now knows that it's coming. So both aircraft get their clearances from the tower, they push back, they taxi, and they depart on time. The tower system generates an actual takeoff time for both flights so that the system starts to know that these aircraft are on their way. It moves out in the ripple, and the downstream systems, here is the Australian systems and the airline systems, pick up that those aircraft have departed. At the same time, it publishes a track to show where that aircraft is at that time, similar to a combination of two that may be one in the future as a position report, giving updates to the trajectories. So it's published by the Bangkok system or the Thailand system. It goes out in the ripple and the SWIM environment, and it's picked up by those that are engaged to receive that information. And it's not someone waiting at a screen and someone looking at a printer, printing it off. It's there. It's just happening in the background. As the aircraft start to fly their trajectory, the Thai system publishes a boundary estimate for Qantas 24 so that the Singapore system knows exactly when it's going to cross that boundary. The Singapore system automatically then calculates the exit point from their airspace so that it can update the downstream parties as well. The identical actions happen for the Virgin flight as well, just 20 minutes later. So Tidar and Arupa, the trajectory updates come. It gives the information. They come into the other systems, and you'll see ETD, position, and the time that they'll be there. That's for Arupa. So that's being generated by the Thai system and picked up automatically by the other systems downstream. From that, Brisbane and Melbourne are still now 8 hours away flying time. Well, actually probably more like 5 hours to the boundary, but they're able to update the estimates of what time they're going to enter their airspace. Now, when they're doing their evening planning for their ground delay program the next day, this is at about the same time as these aircraft depart. The ground delay program, or ATFM, in Australia is done with the domestic flights, so it doesn't factor in those that are departing that far away, but it does have some idea that that's the schedule, so we will consider that. We know that there's going to be some congestion around then, and that we'll have slots there that we expect we might have to move around. Ordinarily, they wouldn't get some sort of confidence on what time they can start to calculate until they're getting the updates from the Indonesian ATC units, which are sent over the boundary currently via the AIDC messaging. So it takes a good while before there's an element of confidence built into the arrivals management calculations. With the SWIM, from the very start, the calculation has that next level of confidence because we already know that that aircraft has departed. We already have received a trajectory update for those aircraft as well. So the confidence level goes from we think it's going to be here at that time, or it's planned to be here at that time, till we know it's departed, and here is the latest, most accurate estimate we have. So we're reducing the error. As both aircraft track through the Bangkok FIR, there are more updates shared, like position reports. The AeroThai EMS sends them, and the downstream systems accordingly pick them up and go through that process again. Every time that ripple runs past, it runs or reruns a calculation or runs an algorithm for a decision-making process. And it's updated whenever you decide that you wish to ingest that information through your agreements with the producer of the information. At TDAR, which is the exit point, the Aerotie EMS shares the last trajectory updates for both those aircraft as they enter Singapore airspace. I can't see from here. From that point, all systems again are updated, another layer of confidence applied to the downstream estimates. From that point, the Singapore Enterprise Message Service will then share the trajectory updates as they both track through that area of responsibility, jurisdiction for the air traffic control. Each of those positions comes through, generated by the Thai system, picked up by the downstream systems, and we see in this case here, the Virgin 32 is the last one out of the airspace, and it's an actual time over TDAR at that time. It looks all confusing, but there is obviously a lot of logic to it. The computers can run it quickly. For those that ever really look into the web page, it's not unlike the HTML standards, so it's not something that's incredibly new and different, just generated for what we're trying to do in the ATM world. It's utilising those methods and styles and designs that are already there off the shelf. While they're transiting, or just after they've entered Singapore airspace, our friendly local volcano on Bali, Mount Agung, decides to erupt again, and it usually only does that when I'm there on holiday, but this time I'm here. So it erupts, and it's quite a big eruption, although not too long, but it does fire ash up to flight level 400, which is observed and picked up by the different satellites and the observers to be moving in the north to a west-northwest direction. Indonesia goes through its normal process of issuing the volcanic ash advisory and the volcanic ash SIGMET in legacy format. So if you're in Indonesian airspace, you will be receiving that very quickly via the VHF or the CPDLC connections that you have in their FIRs. If you're not in that airspace, it takes a bit longer to get to you. So any ideas about changing your tracking, taking action is delayed. So in this case, the Australian Bureau of Met and the Darwin Volcanic Ash Advisory Centre works very closely with Indonesia regarding volcanic activity and volcanic contingency planning. They issue a SIGMET in IWIXM format. So that's the ICAO Weather Exchange model. And they issue that on behalf of BMKG, the Indonesian Met provider, on the volcanic ash notice. The beauty of the IWIXM format then in XML, as you see, more detail than the simple templated ICAO ones we're used to seeing off the AFTN printer or on the screen on the ATC or on the screen in the cockpit. It's able to collate and send a whole lot of richer data that can then include graphical representations that you can see when you can generate 3D on whatever screen you're using. You can actually start to see a very clear picture of where the impact is taking place, as is shown here on the viewer. So because it's shared via the swim ripple in the pond, everyone who's there who already subscribes to that sort of product from the Australian Bureau of Meteorology, they receive that automatically, instantaneously from when it's sent. That gives the airlines time to think about how are we going to deal with this? What shall we do? Our flight plan track actually takes us over there. We obviously can't fly through the ash. We need to start thinking about moving our track from here to other options. So they decide in Qantas that they're going to beat it because they're far enough to the south. They're able to pass ahead of where the ash is predicted to be. And at the same time, they can move their aircraft further west and take better advantage of the jet streams that run from west to east across the Australian continent. So while it's a diversion, they're thinking they probably can make up that time by utilising another effect that they wouldn't have normally tried to use. Virgin looks to go around the back because they are 20 minutes behind and they think we can't fly that way. We're going to take the route around the east and look at coming down more central part of Australia and down the middle of the continent. So they issue changed messages in the FIXM format. They also send them in legacy format in ATS, so Jakarta and Makassar ATCs can obviously get the intention. They send the aircraft the updated trajectories, which are uplinked into the cockpit, and the aircraft request and are cleared via those two new trajectories while they are still in Singapore airspace. Singapore ATC have already seen that there's been a change ingested into their system. They can use that to calculate conflict probe or demand and capacity balancing through their airspace to get an estimate of how it's going to impact their traffic situation and how they will manage it as well when they're considering to issue that clearance. Once the clearance is issued, the Singapore system updates. It publishes new ETOs for the boundary, and that's updated then by the Australian system as well, because now instead of crossing at a single point in the middle, it now has to consider that there are two different points that the aircraft are going to enter at different times now because of the new trajectory and the track miles. So we now have SAPTA, which is the western point, and KIKEM, which is the eastern point. It also changes the point at which the Virgin aircraft will cross from Brisbane into Melbourne FIR on its way to Sydney. So the Singapore system continues to track the two aircraft, producing track or position report style information. We're now on the Singapore Enterprise Messaging Service over here on the other screen, and you'll see it issues a trajectory which updates the positions of those flights. This one we're just getting Chrome. That's okay, I'm sure it'll catch up. So the position there, okay, over here, yep. Where am I looking? No, keep going, okay, no worries. Okay, at the boundary point of Arupa, and you recall earlier that the Singapore system had updated already, so everyone downstream had an idea of when the aircraft were going to cross out of Singapore airspace. At its last point, the Singapore system updates and publishes the final trajectory updates and actual time over that point. So we get those positions. At that point, the Singapore system, like with ATC, has no further jurisdiction of those flights. However, in a swim world, there are reasons where they would continue to receive the information for various reasons, maybe to be prepared if the aircraft need to divert back, if they know that there's the interruption of the ash ahead. Once they've passed out of Singapore airspace, the aircraft enter Indonesia airspace, which in this scenario is not swim enabled. So we want to be able to continue that updating of the trajectory so that the confidence levels remain and are continually improved for the end of the flight and the downstream for the arrivals management. So the Virgin and Qantas airline operation centres have new flight planning systems, which are XML capable, and so they take on the role of updating those trajectories. The aircraft downlink their positions and the AOCs publish them in FIXM format, and that way the downstream units, which is pretty much the Brisbane and Melbourne ATC units, are able to continue to calculate where those aircraft are going to enter at what time and look at their arrivals management sequences as well. So we see entered into and arrived here is Virgin 32. Actual time over was at 14:16 on its way to Sydney from Bangkok, and it was a Sugik position report. Qantas 24 then transits the Indonesian airspace and crosses into Melbourne FIR. At that point, in this scenario, the Melbourne ATSC system will start publishing the trajectories. It assumes jurisdiction for ATC, so it's assuming the updating of the tracking for Qantas 24 in the swim world. Virgin 32, however, still being 20 minutes behind and on a different trajectory, is still transiting the Indonesian airspace and is downlinking its position to its airline ops centre, who are publishing those position reports so that all agencies are able to get it. Around this time, the ground handling crews, the airports are starting to take interest of when the aircraft are going to arrive, so they can start to think about their morning schedule as their staff arrive, where they're going to post them, what gates they're going to do, in what order, what's the priority. As this is happening, the Australian Bureau of Meteorology is up early in the morning, and they are also looking at what they've forecast for Sydney. And they realise the conditions have changed such that they're now expecting a heavy fog at Sydney in the morning to persist well into the late morning. That's published in the iWixom format, and again, as everyone is subscribed in the pond to receiving Met products from the Bureau of Meteorology in a publish subscribe arrangement, then they receive that information in a very, very rapid manner. The airline operations centres obviously receive it as well, as do the ATC, and they all start to realise that something needs to be done. The Virgin Ops Centre decides that after the diversion around the volcanic ash, they don't think that it's worthwhile for them to go and look at holding for an extended period with a good chance of a diversion, so they make the decision at that time to divert the flight to Brisbane. They then publish again another update to their trajectory or a change message, and it is published via SWIM and picked up by all those affected. It's also published again in the legacy format because the Makassar ATSC needs to know that they're going to be asked for an amended route. And that's exactly what happens. So the Virgin Ops sends the new plan to the aircraft, the pilot requests and receives the new clearance from MATS. The pilot updates the FMC downlinks with a new update for the boundary, which is Kickham, and that is shared again with Brisbane ATSC, and they reconcile everything downstream. So again, trajectory update, ETO for Kickham, same action, new information, increasing the accuracy as we get disrupted as we go. Qantas 24, as we said, is already in the Melbourne FIR, receives the amended TAF. Melbourne ATM has been updating the trajectory and continues to do, and is aware that there are changes or there is a big disruption about to happen to Sydney, and they're expecting that aircraft are going to start to talk about their options. Qantas Operations Centre decides to divert the flight to Brisbane as well, and they publish a new trajectory that takes the aircraft from Port Hedland to Brisbane. And what they're utilising then is an even greater effect of the westerly winds to pick up time that they may have lost in their diversion. Incidentally, they also decided at the time, in the future, that if there is a reduced capacity and a capability for some to still land into Sydney, that there is an option for a connecting flight from, say, the west coast of the US that might have greater connection priority for them to change that slot and offer it to them and divert the other aircraft to Brisbane. So they're looking at a whole of network management decision-making process, which they've been afforded now by being able to think of it a lot earlier. The idea then too is that the aircraft doesn't get down to a place where the diversion would have a bigger impact. The new trajectory is automatically shared and updated at the boundary position, which is called MITS, so that the Brisbane system knows. Sydney ATC also identify that neither of these aircraft will be coming into Sydney and that they'll have a less of a demand to manage with the fog. Brisbane and Melbourne then spend the next couple of hours continuing to track the position reports and as the aircraft track. Sorry, let me go back one there. I got ahead of myself. Melbourne is tracking Qantas. Virgin Airline Ops Centre is still tracking Virgin and providing the updates as they are still in the Indonesian airspace. Up in here. Soon after, Brisbane realises that it now has a large amount of demand from the diverting aircraft. Melbourne would be doing the same. And so it does a recalculation of its ATFM program for the next morning, the ground delay program. It's actually able to do that with a lot of confidence because it knows to a good degree of accuracy what the estimates for these aircraft are because they've been continually updated. They're not waiting for an update at the last boundary report prior to their FIR. So from that, they decide that Virgin needs a calculated time over their arrival fix of Smoker in here that requires them to lose 10 minutes from what they currently estimate to be there at. They share this CTO on SWIM. Virgin Ops receives it because they are in an agreement to receive those messages. And they share that with the flight and they ask the flight to start slowing down. They look at the best way they want to manage the situation and the fuel and they ask the aircraft to slow down. The aircraft seeks approval and gets sat in the Macassar airspace, and before it's even entered the Australian airspace, as it commences that action to start to deal with the disruption. The system then is updated via the AOC, sharing the new ETO for Kickham again. When the aircraft crosses out of the Indonesian airspace and Australian Air Traffic Control at Brisbane resumes or assumes the jurisdiction, they also assume the responsibility for publishing the updated trajectory and publishes that last point at Kickham, which has just come in here behind, probably hard to see. We now got another actual position at Kickham, but we're not surprised at the time because we've been continually updated by the aircraft itself via the ground station at the Airline Ops Centre. Qantas 24 is allocated a calculated time over for their arrival fix of Eleni, same distance from Brisbane, but just on the more southerly track that they've planned by or they've changed to. That CTO is shared and the operations centre has a discussion, talks to the pilot, and they decide that they want to also try and reduce the amount of holding they would expect by reducing the time in flight, by reducing the speed in the cruise. So they send that information to the pilot requests it from Melbourne ATSC. Melbourne ATSC is anticipating the potential request for a speed reduction because they know they can see all the information that's being shared as well. When we talk about losing time and better fuel management in the cruise, sometimes we talk about just a lower fuel burn in the cruise compared to a holding pattern at low level. Sometimes losing speed in the cruise doesn't have that great an effect on the fuel burn rate, but what we essentially do by losing time, we can cut out holding patterns. Now, every holding pattern is around 35 track miles each time. That's extra fuel, that's extra 8 minutes in the sky. If we can avoid one of them each time, then we're creating efficiencies. We're also removing complexity from those terminal environments that would be holding those aircraft. The Melbourne system does the new update based on the trajectory calculations and updates for Brisbane ATSC. In turn, those ground handlers, the airport, they start to really think pre-tactically about when these aircraft are going to arrive. For the next couple of hours, both agencies or both units continue to track the aircraft, sending position reports. There'll be a multitude come in here. As you see the aircraft track down via the northwest Australian coast, and multiple points at which they would have agreed where the trajectory updates would be. Not necessarily every waypoint or every position report, but how we decide is the best way to track. Each one comes through. For each one, the viewer starts to move the aircraft down. Again, back in Singapore, even though the jurisdiction has passed, they are able to see all this for whatever reason that they might use that, but it's there, so it's good to have. So the aircraft are tracked all the way into their destination. Due to the westerly winds, Qantas wasn't able to lose as much time, but what it did do, it removed the need for one holding pattern. It was given one, but not two, given one, and then cleared on into the sequence, and the ATO, the actual time over, was then published, so the downstream agencies of the ground crews and the airport know exactly that aircraft is now within a certain time of arrival. Virgin does well because it's not getting as much wind assistance from the direction of the trajectory, and it loses most of its time, such that ATC is happy when it arrives at Smoker at 1955, that it doesn't need anything more than a short vector and then put into the sequence. So essentially, the speed reduction that they've managed to do has removed the need for tactical intervention or significant tactical intervention in the terminal area, where fuel burn is high, complexity is high. Each aircraft lands. The Brisbane system publishes an actual landing time that gets shared again, so the ripple moves back out all the way up the trajectory to whoever has asked to be advised of that, and they get that information. So we've completed our flights. If we talk about what we looked at in the benefits and the potential benefits of doing this, so accurate and timely information comes faster. It supports better decision making, particularly in those disruptive times when the simple gate-to-gate preferred trajectory is not available. The flights were able to take action on the volcanic ash 2 FIRs before they got there. They wouldn't have to wait until they got to the one before or entering the actual one. We have methods now where we try and do that as well, but this creates a much more efficient, much more streamlined, accurate, timely way to share the information. The proposed routes were shared with all swim-enabled shareholders very quickly, so everyone could anticipate, better prepared. The amended TAF, nice and early, provided the airlines time for the need to divert to the alternate. So again, as I said, in particularly Qantas, on a very southern amended route, if the information wasn't considered about the fog until later, it would be a fairly different track if they decided to go to Brisbane. They might not be able to get to Melbourne because it might be congested there because of diversions as well. The new CTOs were able to be sent and have immediate action taken, and so the delays were able to be absorbed in the airline's decision on what is the most efficient mode, most fuel efficient, or for the best business purpose, particularly when we talk about connecting whole of network. A better delay management means better predictability and better opportunities for that enhanced fuel management. Other parties, for example, the ground handlers, they have more reliable and timely notice of those flight estimates, so they can start to allocate their resources in the most efficient way as well. And as I said, future options of slot swaps are a good way to use the information we've got to be able to look at better ways to manage the network. Once again, I thank the technical people for being able to do all the work up there, and Ibrahim in Canberra, and that completes that scenario. Thanks for your time. Any questions?
Two questions. You mentioned that the airlines, Qantas and Virgin, can be publishing this information. Singapore can also be publishing the information. So do we take the most recent piece of information, or does one shut down when the other one picks up? How is that coordinated?
Yep, sure. That would be the plans and the details you do in your swim services agreements. So on a trajectory like that, you obviously have options there of multiple sources, particularly if the airline is swim enabled and the ATC unit is swim enabled. I think for the discussions I had for the benefit of this scenario was while the ATC has the jurisdiction of control, they would do the updating, and then the airlines would fill the gaps when the availability wasn't there from the ground units as well. So it would be something you would spell out in your swim arrangements.
And you had 3 words that you were using in uppercase, so shared, published,
Sure.
and updates. So is there an important difference between those 3 words?
Okay, I should have mentioned at the beginning, and I did on Tuesday in Bangkok, that those words are there to highlight just different uses of it. They're not formal nomenclature. They're for the benefit of helping describe and have people expect when the action was going to be taken. Obviously, a reference model will standardise the type of terms we use, but for all intents and purposes today, they're all pretty much the same. I could just say they're all dropping the rock, we're all dropping the pebble at that time.
Thank you.
No worries.
All right, thank you, Ayata, for that very detailed scenario. Next up, oh yeah. We have a very good audience here. Our next 2 scenarios are interesting as they're related to each other through an airframe. This is presented first by Mr. Peter Chadwick from Hong Kong Civil Aviation Department. He's a senior ATC specialist within Hong Kong CAD and former chairman of Asia Pacific ATFM steering group. And from our conversation, Peter really sees a huge potential in the applications of swim, particularly in improving operational predictability and efficiency. Mr. Chadwick, please.
Thank you very much.
Let's welcome him.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you Scenario 7. Just while the tech team's setting up, I'll just explain to you that originally Scenarios 7 and 8 were going to be one large scenario. In fact, at the outset, the first part of it to demonstrate more current ConOps with swim capability, and linking with a flight using collaborative ConOps of FFICE. Because things are happening concurrently in flight plans of those 2 flights, it was extremely complex to try to follow exactly what was happening if we try to do it in one big scenario. So it was decided earlier on to change these to 2 separate scenarios, Scenarios 7 and 8. So Scenario 7 is the first of a 2-part scenario with compounding impact to flight operations. Scenario 7 is going to focus on a flight from Hong Kong to Tokyo Narita, and it will be affected by the issuance of a couple of SIGMETs, in fact, but it will be affected by a SIGMET issued by Hong Kong Observatory shortly after its departure, requiring an airborne reroute. I want you to keep in mind that while things are happening just to the flight from Hong Kong to Narita, it's also going to impact the subsequent flight trajectory of the aircraft or flight in Scenario 8. So this scenario will demonstrate the ability of swim-based messages to allow airspace users and air navigation service providers to make more timely operation decisions, improve flight safety and efficiency. Once again, the layout, the storyboard in the middle, basically the Hong Kong CAD and Hong Kong Observatory on the left here, and we'll have the JCAB and All Nippon Flight Operations Center messages on the right-hand side, and the visualization. Unfortunately, the font size is very small on that side, but we'll get the visualization anyway. So just explaining a bit more how these two scenarios are linked. Here's our flight. The first one is going to be All Nippon 812, Hong Kong Narita. And in scenario 8, Japan will present the next flight, All Nippon 6 from Narita to Los Angeles. What links these two flights is the fact that it's the same airframe will be operating these two flights. Therefore, the turnaround process in Narita is a critical part of the operation for the airline operator in particular. John just used the terms predictability and confidence. That's exactly what airlines are looking for in terms of this turnaround process. We have uncertainty right now about the estimated in-block time of the incoming flight, which then has uncertainty about the estimated off-block time of the later flight, which may be impacted by something downstream. So that's how these two scenarios will be inextricably linked. And again, keep in mind that anything that we do in the first, or happens to the flight in the scenario 7, will impact later when Japan presents scenario 8. You'll see those same events occurring in a different flight. So now, starting at the scenario, 2200 UTC, it's about 4 hours before the scheduled departure time. All Nippon FOC publishes the flight plan for ANA 812, an estimated off-block time and a route via Ocean of Victor 3, NVAR, and then Mike 750 up through Taipei airspace to Fukuoka FIR and then to Narita. So we see they're publishing that flight plan now, and we'll see if Hong Kong CAD should receive that. They've received the flight plan, there's the visualization. We'll just wait and see if we get the data come up as well. Unfortunately, the Wi-Fi is a little bit slow, I'm afraid. Tom. Just give it another few seconds. If it doesn't, I'll continue on. You see we have got the visualization anyway from the visualization tool, just perhaps not showing the data in the table here. While it's trying to load, I'm sure it'll come up in a moment. I'll continue. We can see the visualization anyway to show that there's, in fact, CAD has received a flight plan, and it's shown here in our flight data processing system. And also it's produced an electronic flight strip in our control tower at Chek Lap Kok. Fast forwarding a couple of hours. This is the first of the weather events, which is going to be published via SWIM. So the first one is, in fact, from the Japan Meteorological Agency, JMA, and they publish a volcanic SIGMET in IWXM format. In ANA FOC, realising the great benefit of SWIM, have enabled their flight planning section with tools to be able to visualise that digital form of SIGMET And we should see the visualization come up there. There we go. They've just published the SIGMET polygon that you can see, also vertical limits, so we have a three-dimensional representation. We're still trying to receive it over here at Hong Kong. Just stand by. Again, problems with the actual data display here, but we've received the SIGMET and visualization here in Hong Kong, both Hong Kong CAD and All Nippon FOC and as well Hong Kong Observatory have subscribed to this, so they are aware of this SIGMET. So the ANA FOC can analyse this and immediately, and they can even have their systems automatically determine this and analyse with the overlay of flight tracks, their flight planned routes. And in this case, they determined that the flight planned route of ANA 812 is not affected by the volcanic ash, as we can see on the screen. And therefore, they decided a rerouting at this point is not required. I'm just going to pause for a moment. I just want to make this catch up. It's been said a few times already today, and Armo said it again in Bangkok, but just bear in mind that these messages are coming not just within this room, but from global servers, and therefore we do have some issues, obviously, with the speed. I'm told it will be okay in a moment, so bear with us, sorry. Finally, here's the flight plan, ANA 812, 787-9, going from Hong Kong off block time 0140. So we've got the flight plan and the visualization of the SIGMET as well. Just reiterating, they decided at this point not to change the routing. Now it's moved forward to 25 minutes before the estimated off-block time, and pilot of ANA 812 requests airways clearance from Hong Kong clearance delivery. This is done by voice still at the moment, or via PDC in fact, not via SWIM. Hong Kong CDC clears the flight to Narita via the standard instrument departure, Ocean 2 Bravo departure, and the pilot reads the clearance back correctly, and the aircraft's advised to report ready for start and push. Just to zoom in on where this track's actually going to take the aircraft, it's going to be departing off runway 25 in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong International Airport being right in the top northwest corner of our FIR. This is the FIR boundary. We're turning to the south and heading out to the east, leaving our FIR at a point called Envar, about just over 200 miles to the east. Boarding's completed, tugs attached, and the aircraft report's ready for start and push. Ground controller clears the aircraft to start and push. It's a reasonable distance for the aircraft to taxi. It's about 12 minutes to get to the holding point. In fact, get to the line-up queue, which is already a few aircraft there ahead of ANA. So while this aircraft's being taxiing, and here it is actually joining the line-up queue, and it's a reasonably busy time of the morning in Hong Kong, so there's a few aircraft ahead, at least another 10 minutes probably until the aircraft gets away. The en route controller in the Air Traffic Control Centre over the other side of the airport is receiving pilot reports of severe clear air turbulence towards the Envar area, about 200 miles to the east. All these aircraft that have just passed through here, and a few of the aircraft that are in this area right now, are reporting severe clear air turbulence at most normal levels, as well as that aircraft that are equipped with download capability are also downlinking back to FOC, and therefore Hong Kong Observatory can subscribe to those as well, as FOC is going to publish those. As far as the voice PIREPs that the controller is receiving, they're already going into the e-log system by the supervisor. That's all happening fairly quickly, and Hong Kong Observatory has access to that. So things that we would not normally be able to do as quickly can be done much more quickly in future. The aircraft's advancing the line-up queue, and Hong Kong Observatory begins to analyse those PIREPs. But meanwhile, of course, even under this circumstance, we would not normally be telling the aircraft about these reports, as it's so close to the departure point. We wouldn't normally tell the aircraft about these reports at this stage. The aircraft's at the head of the queue now, and instructed to contact the ground south controller, and it's finally cleared for takeoff at 0217. A minute later, it's airborne and detected by the Hong Kong Civil Aviation Department surveillance system, and we publish an ATOT message of 0218. We should see that come out. Here we go. 0218 ATOT is published, which was received by JCAB. Also, ANA FOC would subscribe to that, and that would be received by them. So this is the first update of their predictability of the in-block time, basically, at Narita. Based on those multiple reports that were being analysed while the aircraft was in the line-up queue and moving forward for departure, the Hong Kong Observatory has decided that they will publish a turbulence SIGMET for that area to the east, and that's received by Hong Kong CAD and also ANA FOC. So we'll see the observatory publish that, and we'll see that on the visualization. Not on this particular one right now, but so actually it's very hard to see, but you'll see here it's been published, and JCAB and ANA FOC have received that. So before I go on, I'm going to actually pass now to Marco from the Hong Kong Observatory so they can explain a little bit more on how those pilot reports would be analysed and turned into an iWixom format message. Thank you. I'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And I'm Marco Koch from Hong Kong Observatory Airport Met Office. This is the HKO SWIM-enabled Met ATM display. So HKO has subscribed to the flight information queue and also weather queue from JCAB. So Hong Kong Met Office could receive the FIXOM flight plan, also the iWixom SIGMET from Japan, and we saw it on this display. So Here are the turbulence reports received from previous flight crossing over the same area. So these are the actual reports, and actually our aviation forecasters receive two types of turbulence reports. One is the pilot reports that is relayed by the ATC to HKO through the automatic E-log system, and another type is the EDR reports. EDRs stand for the eddy dissipating rate reports, and those are the automatic reports downlink from the Cathay Pacific aircraft. So these are the, here is an example of the content of the EDR reports. It shows the severity of the turbulence. So these are the actual SkyTruth information. After HKO Aviation Forecaster analyzed these actual turbulence report together with the model forecast, and the forecasters predicts the severe turbulence would persist to 1 to 2 hours more over the same area. So they issue the severe turbulence SIGMAT. So this is the SIGMAT issued, and if you click on this SIGMAT, these are the content extracted from the IWISM SIGMAT. And with the SIGMAT and also the flight plan exchanged through the SWIM format, one of the benefits is that we could integrate the flight information with the map information together in the automatic decision supporting tools. So we could have the automatic alerts of the estimated timing for the flight to enter this turbulence area, and also the timing for the flight to depart this turbulence area. So with such SWIM-enabled map application could allow the users to respond more quickly and provide the better support for the timely tactical decision making by the FOC and also the ATC.
Thank you, Marco, for that description. So again, we have the visualization of the SIGMAT here with the routing, current flight plan routing. In fact, the aircraft recalling is already airborne by a couple of minutes and heading towards this area right now. Also over here, FOC has received it as well. So now the aircraft's proceeded down track a little way. It's about 10 minutes after departure. As Marco said, a lot of this stuff can be done much faster, and with machine-readable data can give alerts much more quickly. So ANA FOC is able to assess the impact much more quickly, and they determine that this SIGMAT of clear air turbulence is significant to ANA 812's flight plan route, and recommends through ACARS to the pilot in command that they should consider rerouting clear of the SIGMAT area, and they suggest via route Skate to Capley, which will take the aircraft to the southeast further and about 70 or 80 miles south of the SIGMAT area. The captain agrees with the FOC and advises they'll request a diversion from ATC, and that FOC will prepare and revise a flight plan trajectory via a new waypoint called Capley. So that's in fact what they do. The pilot of ANA 812 makes a request to Hong Kong ATC and asks to reroute after Ocean to Skate Capley and then back up to join the original route somewhere in Taipei ACC airspace. Hong Kong ATC, of course, readily approved that, and the pilot advises a revised flight plan will be published by ANA FOC shortly. So ANA FOC published that amended flight plan for ANA 812 and routing Skate Capley. We'll see them publish that, and then we'll see, so they've published here, and when that appears over here, Hong Kong CAD has received that updated trajectory in the ATMS system. And of course, a revised trajectory is now being produced with revised estimates, which would again update ANA FOC about the estimated in-block time again. So this particular diversion added about another 10 or 12 minutes, I calculated this morning. So it's already been about 10 minutes delayed in the line-up queue. It's another 10 or 12 minutes delay en route, so the flight's close to half an hour delayed into Narita. The aircraft proceeds along the new flight plan track, and at Capley, it's leaving the Hong Kong FIR, and the Hong Kong ATC system publishes an actual time over, which is received by ANA FOC and JCAB, further enhancing their awareness. And again, as I said at the start, remember all these trajectory updates that are occurring in this are going to be fed to Scenario 8. So you're going to see these updates coming to Scenario 8. Flight progresses along the route. It's rejoined the original route again, now passing through Taipei airspace and now crossing the Taipei and Fukuoka FIR boundary. Another ATO is published by, in this case, JCAB. JCAB now has surveillance coverage as well, and under their agreement has, similar to what John just described in his scenario, continuous trajectory or surveillance trajectory updates, not continuous, I guess, but at agreed time intervals. And these would be subscribed to by ANA FOC as well. Of course, we have ACDM at the moment, which is helping with the turnaround process, but normally those milestones are not really accurate until we do get an arrival estimate quite close to the arrival time, maybe 20 minutes before. In this case, we're looking at least an hour or so, hour and a half before the arrival time that they're getting further updates. Finally, the aircraft arrives and an actual landing time is published by JCAB as well, which is subscribed to by ANA. There we go, the actual landing time 0600. And so all along the way we've had trajectory updates feeding into Scenario 8. So what we see is advanced operational capabilities with which require advanced information. The distribution of the digital metadata in the two cases has enabled the airline to make an assessment and enabled alerts for impact of flight operations. Support continuous situational awareness, decision making. Of course, Taipei ACC could have subscribed to all these updates as well and had an earlier indication of the trajectory of the flight even before the AIDC transaction would have normally occurred. Improved demand capacity balancing, continuous distribution of trajectory updates to downstream ANSPs, although this wasn't an ATFM related scenario. Of course, all the ATFM benefits would flow on from that as well. Improved information flow and predictability, greater overall regional situational awareness with intervening ANSPs also able to subscribe. So that is the end of Scenario 7. Thank you. Any questions so far before we go on to 8?
Thank you, Hong Kong CAD, Marco, and Mr. Chadwick. Can we give them a round of applause and take some questions? So Scenario 7 and Scenario 8 are intricately linked. However, we have a change because of Mr. Lee's flight plan. So Can we invite Mr. Lee Peng, Regional Officer of ICAO Asia Pacific, to give us a brief of ICAO's perspective on swim? Mr. Lee Peng, please.
Thank you, Sabrina. I think without anything, I have to learn from Sabrina, from Nan, from Airtie. They have done very good way. And I try to say something. I think I'm Regional Officer CNS, and I'm the Secretary of SWIM Task Force, and also the Secretary for CNS subgroup. So that's reason quite relevant to the SWIM subject. And allow me to first to convey the regards and the greeting from ICAO Regional Director, Mr. Alan Misra, who is on other mission. I think the invitation is sent to him. I just I express his thanks. Before I come in, and I think I ask what's the expectation from ICAO. I think both the key organizer, Airtie, Amo, and the David will give me some task. Ask me to say something about ICAO approach, a position regarding swim. And what is ICAO thinking, what's the role of this demonstration about the first objective? Okay, I try to go along first, and then I say something else. My feedback follows. In fact, what I'm going to say, feeling a little redundant. I think already covered in the brochure you distributed. You in the presentation from Diana, from David, recapped, and also Amo, I think mentioned many things repeat. Let me, without anything, we just review together with you, okay? The very first concept of the swim in ICAO is initially from Airline Vision Conference 12. That is in 2012. And it's a part of ASPO concept. So that is a swim. And ICAO confirmed that's the direction to go. Is the future air traffic management environment. The swim reached, the information reached decision making. So, and to follow up, I think in the 2014, that is the APEMPER 25th meeting, we adopted one conclusion, that 25th 43, that's the conclusion number. Encourage APEC states, administrations, and ICAO to conduct workshop, seminar with respect to on the swim. Try to promote swim, the concept and the implementation. So that was sometime in 2014. I just told during the lunchtime, exactly the same time, similar time frame, an IFA approach to the Airtie and the Singapore for the proposal. I think the same time, 2014, in the park, in the middle park, they discussed about the demonstration. That quite so 5 years ago. And then we have come to the 2016. 2016, we have quite a big event. We have the assembly. I think the assembly also reconfirmed the ASPO in Block 1, Block 2 with a swim. And we also have the Asia Pacific Seamless ATM plan, the version 2. And we have this swim objective, one of them. So that's that in the 2016. And then after that, 2017, I try to remember, you have this ASEAN, some coordination, what we call SSTC, or the transportation group, working group level. And you have this 14th meeting, I remember, and then you have this confirmed for this proposal for the demonstration. At the same year, we have a task force, the initial task force. I think that is set it up the 1 year before in 2006 by APEMPER, and then 2017, we have the first meeting of the task force, SWIM Task Force #1. During that task force, and I think now in addition to the ASEAN states, 10 member states, and we have additional volunteer to try to join your demonstration. I think that is including a number of states. Here we have here today Japan, Hong Kong, China, Australia, and of course US is his sponsor or supporter. And in addition, I think remember we have another three: China, New Zealand, Republic of Korea as well. They expressed a key interest to join this demonstration, and that is in the first meeting of the task force, Swim Task Force 1. And then we have followed this way. We have a long way. I think you prepared almost 3 years, and we have today. And you have made this possible. Quite impressive. I cannot say, you going to the ATM environment, but swim enabled environment, ATM, this demonstrates history. It's history record. In the future, sooner or later, when we have that, we can record what we did today. No matter who said what, but what you did will be remembered. It's great. I think, and also you see what the relation with this demonstration with the IQ work in the regional activity. I think already we have taken a number of, through their preparation outcome already taken by APANPERG. I think the new chairman of APANPERG, Kevin, not here, but I have to say, and I just naming the one of the extension of this FIXM 4.1 that is adopted by APANPERG. Our presentation already mentioned this, but it's just 1 week, 2 weeks ago. That's adopted. And going to be shared maybe globally, maybe useful. And another one is very, very important. That is a philosophy for development of the roadmap for swim for APAC region. That has been adopted by CNS subgroup on behalf of APANPERG. So what's the basic philosophy is? We just try to, from very small things, like this from air traffic flow, to start small block, and then keep building, and we'll copy this, what we're doing, and for expansion. So this is the idea, and you put 4 phases, and that's quite a way to go. That's the reason I think that's accepted by the states in the APAC region. Of course, we have also in the task force, we have accept this the registration, interoperable registration for the first, not like the Europe, maybe Central, the Euro controlled us, I face, but we do something a little different. Perhaps the people talking the wording, the hybrid way or something way, that this, that. Okay, I think that's quite a lot. And we also confirmed this year in the CNSUP group in the through the APANPERG recording report, CRV swim will be built over CRV. Today we got Bangkok as well, the scenario 7, and the other scenarios we got some break, some stop, some interruption. I hope that's caused by your secured prevention from a public internet using. Could be caused by that. I don't know, but it could be by that. Hope we do something CRV or over CRV, no such problem. So that's the reason for the next way forward, I would suggest, because we have a PCW here, the PCW Global, we choose the service provider for the region from Hong Kong, China, based in Hong Kong, China. Can we move a little one step forward? The step forward is going to some small scale, put some simple exercise over this CRV. Can we do that? We have a CRV task for operation group meeting in end of January 2020. If we can do something, I make a little bit step forward, and then make more interesting. Okay, I think that's basically the homework you give me. And for my feeling, personal feeling, and for this on the same area subject, 2 days ago I went to the retreat in Khao Yai, and when driving back, of course we have a GPS in the car, in the vehicle. We got to try to catch this on the 12th event. And when you're in a vehicle, you have the display in the car GPS, the information. and you know where you are, where you go, and it gives you many choice. You highway choice and fast choice, low speed choice. But that information we normally don't use anymore. We like our mobile. We like Google Map, such similar tool. Why? Because they have more dynamic information for the traffic, congested or not congested. They can give me something. Right? So we choose the given by the mobile phone that's information, or the SIM card built into this car vehicle. Similarly, for the aircraft, we should, in the future concept, the TBO concept, we should be able to do that, right? So that, what I try to say is the information-rich environment is more important to help you achieve your destination. All the scenario here I carefully watched is regarding something about the special case, the interruptions, the weather, the ground delay, something. But a lot of things. But in the future, when the dynamic is available in the future, and that is possible, aircraft also like to know the surrounding things, what is the best way to achieve the destination on time. I think, and most of another got a little bit my feeling in the scenario presentation is the user, the IATA, the space user, FOC role. They play a very important role. All the scenarios try to the user space, but it's not from in the future aircraft still. We need the air-ground data link very rich. So that's quite a long time to go. But still, FOC able to see share the same information. They can do something. They have some use for the aircraft. This is very good. And actually, Bangkok leg, I think the director from IATA mentioned some figure. The figure today is last 2018. I try to remember if you correct me now, remember correctly. And some kind of 12 million passengers daily. 12 million passengers to be carried on 104,400 flights a daily. So convert into, but we do have, ICAO also has some figure from Air Transport Bureau, and also have Geneva-based some company do the calculations, but very similar. Everybody say such figure going to be double in next 15 years, Asia Pacific going to be within 12 years. This, how are we going to handle the traffic? So that's very challenging. We have a congested airport, we have a congested airspace. In the APANPEC, under the APANPEC leadership, and in the past decade or 2 decades, we're able to follow the global trend. We introduce RVSM. So that's reduced the airspace capacity increase vertically. And we have introduced a lot of PPN rules, PPN procedure. We can able to manage the parallel rules and to try to put more one direction. A lot of capacity. But we try to, at the same time, what is the potential next? You're able to, for the deficiency, interoperability. I think the swim is the way to go. I follow the Amos words. It's time to go swim. For those days, in a position to do so, you're capable to do, keen to do so, do first, get early benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Now, do you have any questions from the audience for Mr. Lee? Ask him anything about IQ.
We have a highest official from AirThai, from IATA. I think YCC Superter was a moment ago. The deputy DG was here also. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no questions, then we would have our tea break for half an hour. We will reconvene at 4:15. It's actually it's served in the same area where you had lunch and tea break earlier.